Good morning. Welcome to the second of our FRPP data submission training sessions. Today, our facilitator trainers will walk you through the process for submitting data for the FY16 period. Before we get started, I wanted to highlight some items that were just brought up to our attention. So hopefully everybody on the call can see the data dictionary that I've shared. There were two business rules that were brought to our attention after we released version 2 of the data dictionary. So I want to highlight those for you. One of them, our developers are still investigating. Once we have a answer to the business rule question and any necessary adjustment that needs to be made, we will be publishing a version 3 of the data dictionary to reflect these two changes. But since this will be the best opportunity to reach our audience, I wanted to share them with you today. The first change we know has already been programmed as a business rule validation concerning the sustainability data element. And in checking with the Council on Environmental Quality, sustainability is not to be reported for assets located in foreign countries. This was brought to our attention by a user who had begun to submit XML files to the system. So if you have an asset located in a foreign country, the sustainability data element must be null. Otherwise, an error will be generated that you have to fix before the data can be uploaded. The second item in terms of business rule validation, and this is the one that we are investigating, concerns the disposition date. You can see from the note box in the data dictionary, you may not submit a future date for disposition date. However, we believe that you may also not submit a date prior to the start of the fiscal year that's not reflected in the data dictionary. Where our developers are checking on that in terms of what's been programmed into the data dictionary. Once we get resolution on the business rule validation, we'll reflect those two changes in the data dictionary and send it out via email, as well as posting it up on our website, gsa.gov/data dictionary, and there'll be a link to it as well on the homepage of the FRPP MS application. So I wanted to highlight that for everybody today, as I know a lot of you have already started your compilation of XML files or compiling the data that you'll use to fill out the web forms to submit your FY16 data. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to our facilitator team, who will lead us through the training session today.
Hey, Chris, do you mind stopping sharing your screen, and then Lauren can take over?
Will do.
Thank you.
Come on. I was having trouble getting back to the screen, so I just exited out. I'll rejoin the meeting.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you for attending this Federal Real Property Profile Management System, FRPP MS, data submission training session, where we'll be presenting the steps required to submit your data. My name is Lauren Eberts, and I am from the GSA IT User Productivity and Training Group, also known as the JEDI Group. On the line and in the room with me today, I have Chris Canini, Katie Villette, and Daria Medved, who will be helping me with the Q&A pod. We'll be stopping at various points during the session to answer questions. If there's any time remaining, we will utilize this time for questions and answers. Throughout the training, please type your questions in the Q&A pod. Before we begin, for those of you who have called in, please mute yourself so there isn't any static or background noises coming through. Just so you are aware, we will send a copy of this presentation probably next week, so don't worry about copying down every word that I say. So thank you again for joining, and let's get started. During today's training session, we will be covering various topics about the FRPP MS data submission process. We'll first start off the training by providing updates on the FY16 business rules, as well as present the training objectives for this training. Next, we will cover how to log in. For the sake of time, we've included an appendix at the end of this presentation where you can review some information about basic account maintenance. Please note that during the session, we will be logging into a test environment from a GSA account within the GSA network. This utilizes single sign-on rather than manually typing in the username and password. All the data used today is sample data, meaning it's not actual data and it is used for training purposes only. Next, we will discuss various user roles since there is a separation of duties when submitting your data. After logging in, we will begin to discuss the data submission process. There are a few ways to update asset information in FRPP MS. This can be done manually by adding individual assets as well as through XML files. We will also discuss the modify and delete functionality for both. After that, we will show you how to search for assets and discuss the various reports that will be useful to you as you go through this data submission process. There are a few administrative functions that an agency administrator should be aware of, so we will discuss those later on. There's also a slide in this presentation that will provide information on how to contact the FRPP MS Help Desk, and these folks are your technical support liaisons. We will leave a little bit of time at the end for any questions you may have. As previously mentioned, you can unmute your phones if you would like to ask a question over the phone, or you can type your questions into the Q&A pod at any time since we have folks behind the scenes monitoring the pod. If you have any questions after discussing this agenda, please type them in the Q&A pod now. Something I want to bring to your attention is that there have been a few updates from last year's process. The data dictionary for 2016 can be found by clicking this URL here. By the end of this training, you will understand how to attach, validate, upload, and confirm the data that you're submitting in FRPP MS. You will also be able to use the reports that we covered today to help mitigate any data submission errors that you may come across during this process. The overall purpose of this training is to provide a high-level overview of this process. The Office of Management and Budget released a Management Procedures Memorandum to improve federal real property data quality. There are required data validation and verification procedures that need to take place before data submission. There is an executive order in which federal real property asset management needs to be completed to support annual reporting data on real property owned, leased, or otherwise managed by the federal government. So yes, you will be required to go through this process annually, and your submissions are due by December 15th of this year. If there are any questions, please type them into the Q&A pod. We are now moving on to the logging in portion. In order to access the FRPP MS application, navigate to the URL that can be found on this slide. Log in using your username and password. Due to updated security requirements, FRPP MS uses two-factor authentication, so when you log in for the first time, you will have to enter your username and password. You will then receive an email to the email address that is associated with your account. This multi-step process is geared towards non-GSA users. GSA users will use their HSPD 12 cards to log into the system. The email that you will receive will provide you with your second factor authentication code. You will only have to enter in this code once, and then from then on, you will just need your username and password to log in. If you don't remember your password, we have instructions in the appendix of this presentation that you can review when we send you a copy. Upon logging in, you will now be able to perform your work. However, there are 8 different user roles in FRPP MS that you should be aware of. It is important to know the difference between these roles because it will help you understand what your responsibilities are. If you don't know what your role is, you can go to the FRPP MS Home tab located in the upper left-hand corner, and the User Access section will tell you what your user role is assigned to your account. For the sake of demonstrating this process, we will be focusing on the agency and bureau data submission or stage users, agency and bureau right users, as well as the agency administrator. Roles are typically assigned at either the agency or bureau levels. Agency level user roles mean that the user has access to all the assets for the agency. Bureau level user roles means that the user only has access to assets for the bureau within the agency to which they are assigned. The red box outlining these few user roles are the ones that we're going to focus on today. The roles outside of the red box are relevant roles, but they are not specifically being addressed during this training. The data submission or stage user for both agency and bureau can submit data for their assigned agency or bureau via an XML file. They can only attach, validate, and correct data that was staged using an XML file. Staging means that they can set up the file to be uploaded in the system, and the system will verify and validate the information. Once the information is validated, the agency admin uploads the information into FRPP MS. The right user for both agency and bureau actually upload the data from an XML file after the data submission or stage user attaches, verifies, and validates it. Right users also complete any manual data entry in the FRPP MS application. When manually editing asset records in the application, right users edit records one at a time, and these records will already be established in the agency's inventory. The agency administrator can view, edit, and delete for their assigned agency. So basically, they can do everything mentioned above and can be responsible for uploading and submitting the data. And they are the ones responsible for hitting confirm and completing this data submission process. There's also the system administrator that has access to review any data for any agency or bureau. And lastly, read-only for both agency and bureau. These users only have access to read information for their assigned agency or bureau. They cannot submit any data. They are typically managers with a need to see information on the assets at the agency or bureau level once the data has been submitted and validated. Their main role is to perform an asset search. Like I mentioned earlier, if you do not know what your assigned role is, you can find out by going to the FRPP MS Home tab and looking at the User Access section. We will demo the roles of the data submission or stage user, right users, as well as the agency admin. If there are any questions about the different user roles, please type them into the Q&A pod. There are essentially 2 ways to submit your data. One way to submit your data would be through manually adding an asset. The other way is to submit data through an XML format. For agencies or bureaus with only a few properties, it is suggested to manually add or update assets through the asset inventory. For larger agencies with many properties, it is recommended to use the XML template, which I already mentioned that the template can be found in the Data Dictionary Appendix A. We make these recommendations because if you have over 100 or so properties, for example, it would be quicker and less painful to submit data through an XML file. Having to manually enter or update hundreds of assets would take forever. We will be conducting a demo for both processes later on. Now it's time to get to the main portion of this training, data submission in FRPP MS. So first, let's discuss how to manually enter an asset. This slide contains a high-level overview of the manual data submission process. First, GSA copies all of the existing assets from the previous year and saves them in the application for you so you don't have to start from scratch. The right users have two options. They can either manually edit the existing assets in the system, locate the assets in the application, edit the assets, save the changes, and the system will run reports against the current business rules. The agency admin will be responsible for confirming the data, or the right users can add new assets rather than updating existing assets. We're now going to go over the steps of how to add a single asset, and then I will demo how to manually update assets in the FRPP MS application. If you have new assets that were not included in the previous fiscal year, you will need to create a new record for that asset. In order to add a new asset, an agency or bureau right user, as well as an agency administrator, have access to select the Add Asset tab to update their agency or bureau's inventory for the current fiscal year. This is done one asset at a time. They can select this tab and enter all the required data as designated by the red bar or line. The red bar on the left-hand side of the field means that it is a required field. As you enter data into these fields, other corresponding fields will also be required to be filled in. For example, once you choose your agency in the agency field, the associated bureaus, if there are any, will then populate as an option for you to choose from. As a best practice, using the data dictionary will help guide you to understand what fields require alphanumeric or just numeric data to assist you in following the business rules for the current fiscal year. After entering all the data, double check that you have every required field filled in. You may then select Save, located at the top right corner. If there are any errors, it will list the specific fields that need to be altered in order to be compliant. The errors to fix are located at the top of the page, so I'm going to mention this a million times. If you don't understand the errors or what you need to fix, the data dictionary will be a useful tool for you to utilize. It will basically become your best friend while you're going through this process. After correcting the errors, press Save again, and by doing this, it will add the asset to the agency's inventory for the current fiscal year. If you want to add another asset, you will select the Add Asset tab again and fill out another form. If there are any questions on adding a single asset, please type them into the Q&A pod. So we just covered how to add an individual asset, but what if you already have assets in the system and just want to update or delete them? First, an agency or bureau right user or an agency admin would select the Asset Search tab. Select to run an asset detail report, which will help identify the asset that you want to update or delete. You will select the FRPP Asset Unique Identifier to view the individual asset and make your updates. This record is currently in your agency's inventory. As a right user or an agency admin, you'll be able to see the Edit, Done, and Delete options in the top middle portion of the page. By choosing Edit, you will open the Records page so you can begin to make any changes necessary. It will look similar to the Add Asset page as if you were going to create a new asset record for your agency. Once you're done making updates, select the Save button. Clicking the Done button will take you back to the previous reports page, and selecting Delete will remove the record for the current fiscal year. If you were to edit the asset, you would make all of your updates based upon this fiscal year's business rules. Click the Save button in the top right corner once you finish entering the data. You can also click Cancel to discard whatever changes you just made, or you can select Reset, which will wipe the entire record clean, so you would have to manually enter the data. So now we're going to go into the FRPP MS application and demo how to log in, how to perform an asset search to update an existing record, as well as how to add and delete a single asset record that is not already in the system. We'll first start by going to the FRPP MS website. Just so you are aware, I am logging in from the GSA system admin account, so the screens may look a little different since many of you won't have the same permissions. I'm also on the GSA network, so I will not have to put in my username and password or perform the two-factor authentication step. As mentioned earlier, you can find out what your user role is by looking at the user access section, which is where my cursor is now, which is below the FRPP MS Home tab. So now that I am logged in, I will demonstrate how to perform an asset search to update an existing record. So first I'll start by selecting the Asset Search tab at the top of the screen. Next, I will choose a reporting agency. And for the sake of this demo, I'm going to choose GSA. The report type already defaults to Asset Detailed Report. So now I'm going to select Search, which is in the right-hand corner. So now the report populated. Now I can select an FRPP asset ID that I want to update. So I'll scroll down. Okay. So I'm going to select the first asset ID. And you'll see that the record is pulled up, but in order to edit it, I will have to select the Edit button at the top of the screen. So now I will be able to change any of these fields. So now I'm going to change the lease annual rent. And I'm also going to change the lease annual O&M cost. So once I've made these changes, I can select Save. I'm going to scroll back to the top. So now that I'm selecting Save, you can tell that the asset saved properly because you'll see that the metrics have changed down here at the bottom. I'm going to select Done because I do not have any further edits for this asset. So now we're going to show you how to add a new single asset record that is not already in the system. An example of why you would add an asset could be that an agency or bureau acquired a new building or an asset that did not exist last year, so it wouldn't have a cloned copy to edit. So in order to add an asset, navigate to the Add Asset tab. The red bar on the left-hand side of the fields mean that it's a required field. So I'll first start by selecting the reporting agency. It'll be GSA again. Next, I'll select the reporting bureau. And just so you all are aware, all the data that I'm entering in the system is strictly for the sake of demoing the application and it is not real data. Next, I'll select the real property type, the legal interest, installation identifier, the real property unique identifier, the sub-installation identifier. And you'll notice the more fields become required as I enter in more data. All of these fields are conditional. So next, I'm going to choose the using organization you can see, using organization bureau, status, lease authority indicator. So I'm going to incorrectly enter data here so I can show you an example of what you'll receive when there's an error in your form, and then I'll show you how to fix it. The real property use, outgrant indicator, lease expiration date, square feet. Square feet, unit of measure. Next, I'll put in the location, so street address, the country, and you see that more fields have popped up. Note that I chose the country. Next, I'll select the county. And the city, the zip code, and congressional district. Next, I'll select the lease annual rents, and then lease annual O&M costs. All right, so now I'm going to review the form to make sure that I have entered in data for all of the required fields, and it looks like I have. So now I'm going to select Save at the top right corner. And as I mentioned, there will be an error. I'll click Save again once I correct. And so it says lease authority indicator selected is not applicable for the reporting agency selected. So this means that I have to change it, and I'm going to change it to categorical space. And now I'll select Save again. All right. So you can tell that this was added because it brought me to a screen. It has 0 errors in it, and I can select Done. If you want to add another asset, you can select the Add Asset tab again and start all over. So we already demonstrated how to modify an existing asset, so now I will show you how to delete an asset record. So first, I will select Asset Search. I'm going to select GSA as the reporting agency once again. The asset detail report already populates for me. So next, I'm going to select Search. So I'm going to scroll down, and I'm going to find the FRPP asset ID, which is the record that I wanted to remove. So I will select the hyperlink, and then I will select Delete. It'll prompt you, are you sure you want to delete the asset? Select OK. And now it has been removed from the agency's inventory. If there are any questions, please type them into the Q&A pod. Now I'm going to go back to the presentation. Next, we will discuss how to submit your data via an XML file. Like I mentioned before, submitting XML files are useful for agencies or bureaus with large numbers of properties. Here's a high-level workflow of the data submission process using XML files. First, GSA copies all the existing assets from the previous fiscal year and saves them in the application. The data submission users and/or agency admin need to decide their deletion strategy. Either the agency admin will clear the agency's inventory by performing an inventory clearance, or the data submission users will update the XML files from the previous fiscal year. The XML schemas used to update the records can be found in the data dictionary and also on the homepage of the FRPP MS application. The data submission user will then attach the updated XML file, which is then staged, and the system will validate the files against the current business rules. This process flow shows the users who are responsible for submitting the XML files how the data loads through the system and when they can expect to run different reports. These reports will let the user know if there are any errors with the data. They will then need to correct the data and reattach the file. After correcting the XML file for any errors, the agency or bureau's right user would upload the file, thereby updating the agency's inventory for the current fiscal year. After that, the agency admin will confirm the process has been completed. This basically means that there will be no more updates for the agency for the current fiscal year. Throughout this process, you will have various reports that you can run. You will see this graphic a few times throughout the presentation since it will help us keep track of where we are in the process. As we continue, we will discuss the reports in greater detail. This slide is to inform you that the XML template that you will be using to submit your data is available in Appendix A, XML schemas of the FRPP MS Data Dictionary, which can be found by clicking this hyperlink on the slide. You can also find the XSD document zip file, which is located on the FRPP MS Home tab under the Document Library section. Here's a little breakdown of the template. At the first level, right here, where my cursor is, you will find the action attribute, agency code, and fiscal year. The action attribute tells FRPP MS what to do with the file, and there are three options. Add, which means to add the new asset, modify, which means you're updating an existing asset, and delete, which will delete the asset. However, you cannot mix and match the action attributes throughout the file, meaning you cannot add an asset within the same file in which you are trying to delete an asset. Before you begin this process, it is important that you are aware of the different delete options available to you because these delete options will impact your strategy for updating and submitting your agency's data. The first option is for the agency admin to perform an inventory clearance, which is an automated process where it will delete all asset records in the inventory for your agency or bureau for the current fiscal year. Once this is complete, the agency admin will receive an email notification. The second option is to individually delete records from your agency or bureau's inventory, which is done through the asset search. Lastly, you can delete batches of records from your agency's inventory using XML files with the delete action attribute. You'll notice at the top of the image that in all capital letters, action equals delete in quotations. For more information, please navigate to the data dictionary for a list of XML schemas that you can utilize. To reiterate, you cannot mix and match the action attributes. So there is a new XML action attribute that allows you to delete batches of records in the attached XML file after it's been validated by the system and uploaded by the data submission user or agency admin. Once the XML file is attached and validated against the business rules, the file with the delete action attribute will immediately delete all the records within that file from your agency or bureau's inventory. The reason you need to upload multiple files is because the system will only accept one action attribute per file. So if you have a file for deleting records, you'd have a file for that. If you're adding to your agency's inventory, you'd have a separate file for that. And then if you're modifying records, you'd have another separate file for that. Just to note, it is recommended that you have a file that doesn't exceed 50 megabytes. If you have a file that is over 50 megabytes, you would have to split up the file to have multiple files so it can process properly. In the past, some agencies had a preference organizing their files in which they want all their buildings in one file, a separate file for structures, a separate file for land, a separate file for different bureaus, etc. It's just an easy way to track if a specific bureau has an error. They will know which file to look into rather than searching through a massive XML file with multiple bureaus. If there are any questions, please type them into the Q&A pod. As you can see by the red rectangle and arrow outlining the attached section, this indicates that we are about to start step 5 of the data submission process. Now we're going to go over how to attach a file for the data submission process. A data submission user or an agency admin would select the data submission tab at the top left-hand corner of the page. Next, you would select the agency in which you would like to attach the file for, and then select Attach File. After you've selected Attach File, you'll be brought to a new page to actually attach the file. From here, you'll be able to browse to your computer to find the file you want to attach, and then click Open. Click the Attach File button below, and you can select multiple files if you wish. and then click Done once you've attached all the files you want to attach. Selecting Done will bring you back to the previous data submission page. You'll then select your agency again from the drop-down arrow, and it will show you all of the agency stage files that were attached. You will also see a status next to each file, and just so you're aware, the most recent file added will appear at the top of the list. As the files are staged and they are processed and validated in the system, you will then notice a file status associated with each file, and there are 7 possible statuses after processing. Invalid means that the file has errors in it and the data business rules have failed. These errors need to be corrected by the agency admin or the data submission user, and you can correct them by using the data dictionary as your guide. You can correct them directly in the system by running an error report, but we will discuss this later in detail. If you correct the file outside of the system, like on your computer, it will need to be reattached and validated again. If the file has a valid status, then this means that there are no errors in the file and the agency administrator can select upload, and the records will be added to the inventory for that agency. When you see an uploaded status, this indicates that the agency admin has already selected to upload the valid file, and the records within the file have been updated and are reflected in the agency's inventory. Remove and reload means that a file was previously shown as invalid or invalid XML file status. It could also be the case where the file had been tagged as valid from the previous fiscal year, but it needs to be updated to reflect the current fiscal year. In this case, you need to remove the file and reattach it for validation. If the fiscal year validation has failed, this means that the fiscal year hasn't been updated since the file has been uploaded in the system, and this normally means that the associated record will have errors. Delete process. This means that a valid file was attached and it also had the delete action attribute that we mentioned earlier. This means that the delete was immediately processed and all of the records were deleted for the agency's current fiscal year. This is more of a notification status and less of an error status. Invalid XML file. This status means that the XML file that was uploaded did not have the correct XML format or schema, which means that the system could not properly read the file because it did not conform to the business rules. This can mean that there are typos or unwanted spaces, so you'll have to remove the file, update the XML schema, and reattach it so it can be considered valid. As you can see by the red rectangle and arrow outlining the upload section, this means that we are about to start step 6 of the data submission process. After the data submission user has attached the file or files, he or she will see a status next to each file in the upload column. If applicable, you may select one of the error reports under the reports column and edit the errors directly in the file. Once the file is free of errors, you will need to email or notify your agency admin so they can select upload under the upload column. The data submitter's role is now complete, but we're not done yet. We still have to discuss what it means to confirm the data, which is done by the agency admin. If there are any questions, please type them into the Q&A pod. We will now show a quick demo of how to attach, validate, and upload an XML file. So switching back to FRPP MS. So from the home page, like I mentioned earlier, in the document library, you'll see the XML template and the XSD document zip file that I mentioned. So in order to attach an XML file, select the Data Submissions tab. At the agency dropdown, I will select Agriculture. And now I'll select Attach File. First, I'm going to select Choose File so I can go into my computer and select files. So I picked all the files that I wanted to attach, and so I'm going to click Attach File. All right, so this status here is showing that this is the only file that was attached, and now I'll click Done. Okay, so now in order to find that file again, I have to click Agency and Agriculture. So now that we're waiting for the file to give us a status, it now says validation in progress. You'll notice that here are the other files that have been uploaded. It will show you who is last changed by, the last changed date, and also the status. You'll notice the reports here on the last column. So if I wanted to update any errors or correct any errors, I would click one of those reports. And just to note, the larger the file, the longer it will take to load. And you'll also see that after the agency admin has selected the upload button, the upload summary report will now be available. All right, so now that we see that the status has changed to valid, so this was a valid file, and the agency admin is ready to upload the file. So now we're going to switch back to the presentation. Next, we will discuss the different reports that are available for you to use to correct the data files. Just so you are aware, different user roles will see different reports. The validation summary report will display a summary of the validations and number of errors by asset type. The purpose of the validation summary report is that it shows how many records are contained in the file, and it also shows the error totals for 3 different asset types. Both the agency admin and data submission user can use this report so they know what to expect to change before uploading the file. The next type of report is the detailed error report. This report displays all the errors in the file at the data element level. You can select one of these unique FRPP asset IDs to open a record. This means that you're opening a stage record and then correcting the errors directly in the file. As a data submission user opens up the records, they will have the option to click the edit button for the stage record. Clicking edit will show what is missing and invalid. After making the appropriate edits, click the save button in the top right-hand corner. The record will now be updated, and then you can return to the data submission tab. You should correct all errors in the file so it can be re-uploaded with a valid status. After this, the agency admin can select Upload to submit the data. The data correction report essentially has some of the same functionality as the detailed error report, but all the errors for the attached file are displayed at an asset level and not at the data element level. The benefit of viewing errors at the asset level versus the data element level is that it shows the level of magnitude in which may affect how an agency decides to make corrections. As you can see by the red rectangle and arrow outlining the confirm section, this means that we are on the final step of the data submission process. The next section within the data submission tab is the reports and confirm data section. It will allow you to review the information that was updated for your agency. This includes the XML files that were submitted, as well as any individual asset records that were added manually or updated, and there are 7 reports available. Just to note, the agency admin is strongly encouraged to run all the reports as an accuracy check. A data submission user or an agency admin will be able to run these reports. However, the agency admin will be the only user to confirm the data in FRPP MS. Once the agency admin selects confirm and 0 errors occur, then the data submission process for your agency or bureau will be considered complete for FY16. Now we will discuss asset searches in greater detail. If you have any questions, please type them into the Q&A pod. Here's a list of the different reports that are available to run. The important thing to take away from this slide is that the asset staging report is accessible to the data submission users and the agency admin. The remaining reports are only accessible by the right users and the agency admin. As we briefly covered already, in order to perform an advanced search for a particular asset, a data submission user or agency admin would select the Asset Search tab. Once you have the page pulled up, you would select from each of the fields to filter and narrow down your search. This is basically weeding out information that you do not want to appear on your report. Select the report type in the top right-hand corner, and depending on your role, the reports that are available to you will change. You can create how you want this report to look, so you can choose a couple of attributes. You're not required to choose an option from each category. The only required field is the report type. After you finish making your selections, click on the search button in the bottom right-hand corner to run the report, and the report will then generate. Say that you want to print this report so you can have a personal copy on your computer's hard drive. You would select Printable View from the report page. When you select Printable View, it automatically gives you the option to save it as an Excel file to your desktop. Choose a folder on your desktop and then select Save. And now I'm going to demonstrate how to perform an asset detail report. So in order to run an asset detail report, I will first select the Asset Search tab. And I'm going to choose GSA again. In order to narrow down my search, I will choose a few attributes. The real property type, the legal interest, and scroll down to the location. This is also a conditional field. So now I can choose a state, choose DC, and so now I can select search since I have no other attributes I want to add. So now that my report has generated, I can select Printable View, and it automatically downloads to your computer. If I were to open it, you'll get a notification that's basically you're verifying that it's not a corrupted file, so just choose yes. And so now I can save this to my computer and print it. So now I'm going to switch back to the presentation. If there are any questions, please type them into the Q&A pod. Next, we will go over the different administrative functions that are specific for an agency administrator. This is just to show you a couple of housekeeping items that will allow an agency admin to perform their job more efficiently. Using the Administration tab, an agency admin can utilize the User Search and Inventory Clearance functionalities. The User Search function will allow an agency admin to search for users in the agency that they're associated with. It is possible to be associated with more than one agency. So if you're associated with Department of Interior and Department of Homeland Security, you'd be able to view all the users within those agencies. You can search for the users by their login name, first name, or last name. It will also show you whether the user is active or inactive, as well as their access level or role. You can use the User Search functionality to see whether someone's account is locked and needs to reset their password or maybe update their access level. It would be the agency admin's responsibility to submit a help desk ticket on their behalf. The Inventory Clearance tab will allow an agency admin to clear the inventory for their agency. or up to 5 bureaus at one time for the current fiscal year. You can use the control button on your keyboard to select more than one bureau. This clearance process will run behind the scenes and will send you an email once the clearance has been completed. You would clear an agency's inventory if you had a discussion with the data submission user and they agree that they want to start from scratch to submit their data for the current fiscal year. Data submission users do not have permissions to clear an agency's inventory. There will also be a log of the different inventory clearances that have been performed for the selected agencies or bureaus. It will tell you the date that the clearance process took place, and it will also list who was responsible for clearing the agency's inventory. It will also have a column that will tell you whether or not the agency's inventory has been completed or not. You will not see the individual records that have been cleared. Once the inventory is cleared, it is gone for the current fiscal year. And you want to make sure that you are being careful since there isn't a back or undo button for this process. And so now I will demo how to perform a user search and inventory clearance in FRPP MS. Okay, so in order to do a user search, an agency admin would click the Administration tab. We would choose the User Search tab after that. And surprise, surprise, I'm going to choose GSA as an agency. Okay. I can enter in someone's last name, first name, or access role. So let's see who has agency admin privileges at GSA. So I'll select the role under the FRPP access level. All right, and then so now I can select search. And now I can see everyone in the GSA agency with the agency admin role. Okay, so in order to do an inventory clearance, click Administration again. And now I can select the Inventory Clearance tab. I bet you guys can't guess what agency I'm choosing. GSA. Anyway, so now I can click up to 5 bureaus at a time, and I can click Clear Inventory to clear out their inventory for the current fiscal year. But for demonstration purposes, I'm not going to click this button. And next, I'm going to switch back to the presentation. Okay, so now that we have completed the training, you have the right tools to efficiently and effectively submit your data by December 15th. If you encounter any technical issues with the application after you try all of this on your own, please email the FRPP MS Help Desk or call the phone number listed on this slide. Okay, so now we are going to open up the floor for any questions that you may have. You may unmute your phones if you would like to ask a question over the phone. The Q&A pod is also available. So I will now hand it over to Chris and Daria.
One thing I do want to highlight, and it was one of the questions that were asked, was in regards to access. So I do want to encourage users, if you have not accessed the system, your account is probably locked because passwords have to be reset every 90 days according to IT security protocols. So please send myself an email address requesting that the password be reset. Also, if you need additional users to access the system, please send those to me. Tickets do have to be created in the new Salesforce environment, so it does take a day or so to complete those, and I don't want agencies to be held up because the people needing to perform functions don't have accounts created. So I'm going to run through the questions that have previously been asked in the Q&A pod, and then we'll open it up to any others that have been asked. Anybody else who wants to ask a question on the phone. First question was about creating a new role This was covered in the V&V training that was conducted for agency admins. Right now, that ability to access the V&V portion of FRPP MS is only available to agency admins. Our help desk developers are investigating alternative approaches to expanding it beyond agency admins. And once they have some information, we'll convene a conference call to discuss it among agencies to reach consensus on that issue, as well as some of the other suggestions that agencies had when that training was conducted. The next question came in on the Q&A pod. Currently, someone has staging access to FRPP MS as a data submission user, but they also need to correct data once it's uploaded, and they wanted to know how to do that. That is the change for this year from last year. Previously, a data submission user can only see data that has been staged but not uploaded. A right user could see data that has been uploaded but not staged. We do have the ability to combine those two roles for a particular user to be both data submission and right user. So if you think that you need that access to both uploaded and staged data, send a request to your agency administrator who can initiate the change in your access role with me. The next question that came in on the Q&A pod was also regarding accounts and wanted to know if some changes that had been submitted had been completed. And I told them they did, but again, an encouragement to everybody on the phone. If you need your password reset or if you need additional accounts created or changes to existing accounts, please let me know. You can also contact the help desk to initiate that process. Had a question regarding a user who has been submitting files and getting an invalid XML file error. And our help desk developers are investigating several instances of users getting an invalid XML file error. Don't have a resolution to it yet. If you do come across an issue, either an invalid XML file error or an invalid error that you can't figure out why it's generating that error, send myself and the FRPP help desk an email. Please include the XML file in question as an attachment to your email. It would also help us if you would include a screenshot of the error that you're getting to speed up the process. And the last question was some feedback on the switching between the demos and the PowerPoint presentation. So we appreciate that feedback. And we'll take it under advisement for future instances of the training. So with that, are there any questions from anybody on the call?
Hey, Chris, this is Ruben Vitorazga with USBR. Who would our new users be getting an email from regarding their access? I'd like to verify with the changes that we submitted earlier this month that they've actually received their access. I know I had some issues with mine currently, and I've did what you asked and sent you and FRPP MS an email regarding that. But who should they be expecting an email from so I can verify with them?
It would be, the sender would be noreply@gsa.gov.
Okay.
I believe the subject line is welcome to FRPP or welcome to FRPP MS.
Okay. Thank you.
And there was a long list of about 20 users from throughout Department of Interior, and they were handled at various points, but I believe the last couple were finished up this week. So
Yeah, you asked that folks log in and verify their request and their access, and I did that this morning, and I asked for that data submission and write role, and
okay.
I've been reverted back to read only for some reason. So I sent you an email. I guess we can handle it offline. It's not an issue to be.
Yeah, offline. Because those were, and well, double check the instructions that I got from your agency admin to make sure that they were implemented accordingly. But I followed the instructions that I got from the agency admin.
Yeah, I think the request that we had was to submit them to Dan Collins.
Yeah, and Dan's the one who sent it to me.
Okay.
So I'll go back and if you included in your email the request that you were at, the level of access you were asking for, I'll match it up against what Dan had in his sheet.
Okay.
And then
I think I included the sheet that we had sent back as well. So
okay. All right.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions?
Hey, Chris, this is Tammy Skinner, and I was just curious. We're the ones with the XML file error. We sent that file example and screenshots about 2 weeks ago, and we still don't have any resolution on that.
Okay.
Is there an estimated time that this potentially can get fixed? Because it's kind of putting a crimp on us getting that stuff ready. So
I understand.
If we have an ETA. So
I can check with the development team. I know we had a weekly status meeting yesterday, and it is the highest priority set of tickets that they're currently working on. And I can ask them if they've got an estimate.
Okay, that sounds great. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Any other questions?
No.
Anyone else have any questions?
No.
All right. Again, I'll make another pitch. If you've got password resets that you need done, if you have account changes that you need instituted or new accounts created, please send those as soon as possible. We don't want to delay your submission process because the people do not have the right level of access to finish your submission for your agency. And as I said in the beginning, concerning the business rules for disposition date and what's the allowed range for disposition dates, as well as incorporating the business rule that I know is already in the system concerning sustainability not being allowed to be reported for assets located in foreign countries. We will soon issue a version 3 of the data dictionary to reflect those changes. The data dictionary aligns with the business rule validations within the FRPP MS system. So, again, if there are no other questions, we'll go ahead and end the training session. Again, we appreciate your time. If you have any offline questions, feel free to reach out to me. Have a great weekend. Bye.
Thank you.